This is Duke University.
Notice that we assume that people care about dance, and that we're just going to talk about technology and digital research or race within dance, as though everyone's going to have this kind of physical response to the need for social mobilization, the need for a kind of rethinking about what's possible in terms of playing fields, or whatever kind of language we use, debt and gifts, and that sort of thing. So this sense that somehow, because we live in dance in a certain kind of way, we're exceptional, because we're going to be the ones who are going to go see the show, or look up the YouTube reference, or find out who was the choreographer for Saturday Night Fever, and what happened to that person. So we're already sort of implicated in the construction of knowledge in this field. But then the other thing that we do is we tend to kind of go big picture. I assume you don't know anything about dance, so I'm going to try to have to explain everything about how it works. So I'm going to create a tool that allows us to draw what the body does. I'm going to create a way to talk about empathy that'll relate it to you and your child, or you and your lover somehow. I think that kind of really huge picture view of dance makes it really, really tiny. In some ways also insignificant in trying to make it just like everything else in life that has what we might call a body, or embodiment, or kind of relationship to breath and presence. Saying you started as a dancer or are a dancer is somehow really different from saying as a historian. So, I want to acknowledge that and see what would it be to actually bring those terms into relationship with each other. So, Randy was working on application of economic theory and ed studies and dance theory for a really long time. He was always talking about remains and remainders. So Harmony, in her riff on debt, I think that riff was really crucial, something that Randy had been bringing to us, all of us, and helping us try to think through. And I wonder if it got a little bit buried in how important that innovation that Harmony was offering us just now really is. This idea that there's credit, around kind of acknowledgement that credit produces debt, and credit also produces a subject. So this is a really important formulation that's pretty terrific. And as we try to loop it back to thinking about dance studies, there's this way that talking about literal debt in the academy. So the grad students and undergrads in the room, they're in debt before you even show up. Before you send the application in, you're in debt. And that's not an abstraction that produces a subject or not. There's a way that we can use this theory and it becomes abstract, but it's also literal. And there's a way that, some people don't have to, maybe white people don't ever have to be responsible for the debt. I appreciate that point. At the same time, debt is on our body. So we breathe through debt in relationship to it. And, I don't know how many people actually get to be unfettered by debt. Maybe that's along that Paris Hilton kind of realm. They already half a percent. But then these are people who are already manipulating their bodies, their literal bodies, in ways to remain in that half percent. So there's a funky way where I want to postulate. I want to offer that debt is on the body, and that's a truth and not an abstraction. And then there's a way that dance, as a practice, has its own. There's the metaphorical abstractions about how to think about dance, but then there's the practice of dance. And one thing we're always facing is, does dance need dance studies? Do we need dance studies in order to dance? And this is a huge, huge sore for us, that as dance moves, and the us is all of us, not just people in dance, but as dance moves more and more into places like Duke, like Yale, like Stanford, like Harvard, as it's always already been in the community colleges. So it'd be interesting to kind of look at that history, but kind of the people, if you will, always made space for dance as part of what it is to become a citizen. And these larger institutions like Duke, we're really, really late to the game. So we're kind of trying to start way up here. But then there's still a practice of dance that, I don't know if it's down here, but it's just all over. So people do dance. Do the people dancing need dance theory, dance studies? This is a big question. I've had terrific disagreements with colleagues about this. And, essentially dance theorists say, well, of course, but then you can't be a dance theorist unless you believe that. So, there's a double bind there. I seem to imply that maybe dance doesn't need dance studies, but, in the 21st century, and we have access to information age, whatever, big data. So this is really helpful. There are new ways to use data to think about how to historicize dance or maybe repopulate its capacities or possibilities. But I think that, now that we have access to information, when we're teaching younger dancers who want to be performers, want to find ways to make expression that matters to them and also can matter to their cohort, to their peers, and maybe to intergenerationally, maybe to younger relatives or to older relatives or their teachers. Yeah, we need this information. And we need to figure out how to provide information that'll be helpful in terms of structuring materials so that it can do something in the world, which is probably what young artists and young makers want. So dance studies and dance theory provide strategies for kind of corralling information, corralling critical race theory, corralling sexuality studies, and mobilizing that information that's already happening in the world towards the creation of artistic products, or at least social products that involve bodies moving, which might be a way to think about dance. But I certainly don't assume that the questions that mattered 20 years ago matter the same way as they did today. So I do think, while what the cultural wars suggest and tell us about things that remain an ever-changing same, it's the same. Institutional racism, it's the same. And it shifts. It's a little bit slightly different in every iteration. It appears differently in the world. So I'm just wondering about what if we thought of the possibilities now and this idea of remains, like what remains from our ever-increasing debt. If we imagine dance as the enlivenment of energy that's not tilted towards a knowable future, I think part of our challenge is that we tend to want to be able to predict what will happen. And so then we need to stabilize these narratives in certain ways so that they're recognizable. But maybe what's happening, another way to think about it, or something that's happening also alongside that kind of tendency, is this creation of space that's aberrant, odd, and unpredictable. This is something that we always want from art. Unpredictableness is actually a vector of recognition, like something that makes art is that we don't have a way to predict what it is. If we already know what it is, then, it can be art-like, but that's where we get to this place. And this isn't about high and low. This is true in social dance too. A new social dance, if you will, does something that's different from the social dance that preceded it. So, there's this unpredictability or this kind of innovation that's always in there. So what if we started thinking about dance as being able to enliven this unknowable future, or resists thinking it has to be about a knowable future? And I wonder if that couldn't help dance history, dance theory, and dance studies be more present in emerging conversations about data and art making and humanities research. Okay, so time for the thingy. I can see it. I'm going to end with something that I made a couple of years ago that, for me, kind of speaks to the possibilities of theoretical exercise, historical exercise, and performance.
produced by Duke University, online at duke.edu.